In order to build the best brand that is your best self is to be your truest self, ditch the act, and start to be real.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. Holy moly! Welcome to conversation number 52 of the Kristof Lewis Podcast. 52 marks the year, if my math is correct, and I could not be any more excited right now to just... Oh my god, I'm so pumped right now. I can't even make words into sentences. But this has been a year of podcasting. I set a goal of one podcast a week, and here I am. 52 weeks in a row, 52 podcasts in a row, and 52 weeks of awesome, unrelenting support from you guys, the listeners and the viewers. I cannot thank you enough. Like, for real. I'm so appreciative of all the support that I've gotten. It is undying and unrelentless, plain and simple. You guys rock. You guys have literally given me the motivation and the inspiration, inversely, to keep on going and keep on pushing. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I always say this podcast isn't one way. It isn't just me putting this information out there and showing you these conversations and these contemplations and just giving you this information. It is is it reciprocated? Always. Like, you guys inversely give me the energy and the fuel that I need to do this job. And I absolutely love it. I hate that I even called it a job. It's not a job. But I love doing this, and I couldn't be more appreciative. So thank you so much. My guest today for number 52 is Ryan Foland. He's been on TEDx 4 times. 4 times. This dude is awesome. Oh my god, I just had a fun time talking to him. He's very, if you were listening to this, so you're not going to see it clearly, but he's very theatrical, and he's very energetic, and he's spinning around, and he's awesome. Super great guy, and we had a lot of fun talking. He really challenged some ideas that I had, opened my mind up to new perspectives, new ideas, and I just had a great time with him, and I'm very happy that he could be number 52. Find me on kristoflewis.com. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoy this episode, hit me up and let's talk. So without further ado, welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast.
It's good to be here.
Oh man, I love that. For those listening, Ryan just did a fantastic twirl. And let me tell you, I love being transparent, and man, this has been really tough already. We've hung up and recalled 5 times. My computer crapped the bed, my router turned off. And you know what? I just want to make a point, again, right off the bat, that we talk a lot about careers and things that may be difficult to do, like career transition. And I know that I've been doing this a year. This is episode number 52, man. This is the year mark. I haven't missed one for a year, and things still happen, but I know that I'm not going to let it deter me. I'm not going to let it affect my energy, because I am very aware, because I've done 52 of these, that I know things just constantly come up, and I was prepared. I did a test call. I tested the speakers. I tested the video. You can do so many things in your life, and you can be prepared as you want to be prepared, but sometimes things just still go kaput.
Yeah, one of the things that I really believe in is that we have very little control over just about anything. But there are 3 things that we have ultimate control over. Number 1 is your reaction. Number 2 is the way that you choose your attitude. And number 3 is the time you choose to take before you choose to speak. That element in its own is one of the most powerful and most underutilized tools of just having the power of controlling that gap or that pause. So things happen all the time that are terrible or just not the way you want them. You can choose your reaction, you can choose your attitude, and you can control the pace and the cadence and the temperament of the situation based on your speed of reply.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a reoccurring theme almost every podcast, is that we are not the thoughts and emotions that immediately come into our heads. It comes up all the times. We are how we react to that. And that's one thing I practice on a daily basis, multiple times throughout the day. And I've people that are regular listeners know that I had a kid 9 days ago, I think now. And my capacity for reacting to situations in a rational way has severely been challenged. But if there's any time in my life where I'm ready for it, now is the time, because I'm talking about this every single day, every single week, and I've got to practice what I preach. But it's super hard when you're sleep deprived, when you're hungry, to not let these emotions get the best of you. But I try to, even though it's my life, these things that happen are really hard to practice sometimes, but I try to use it as practice and not taking away from my life, but I'm just saying, try to catch myself in the moment and be like, hey, this is a really good time to practice what you tell everybody, even though you're tired and you're hungry and this baby's screaming at you for no apparent reason. Try to relax and think about the things that you teach other people, and this is a super good opportunity to do it. And I liked one of the other things you said is
reaction, attitude, and the time you choose to take before you choose to speak.
Yeah. The time you choose to speak. That is the other thing that I wanted to mention, is because a lot of times people they react quickly, or they reply to somebody quickly, and they don't just savor kind of what they hear before they speak. And I think that's a really important part to note too, is because a lot of times people I think when you're, and I've noticed it in myself a lot of times, when you're speaking or when somebody else is speaking, I'm just waiting to talk, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not even listening. Maybe I latched onto one tiny thing you said initially, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to reply to that. And then I kind of auto tune out everything else. So waiting to reply kind of goes for me in conjunction with that, to actually hearing somebody out completely. I mean, do you get people that maybe ask you questions on how do I do that? How do I become a better listener so I can just be a better friend, a better spouse, or something like this? Do people approach you maybe with these questions of how can okay, so I've heard you say all these things, Ryan, but this is really hard to implement in my life. So how do I go about implementing that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. In fact, so much, and it's so relevant in how I communicate. It's the topic of my 4th TEDx talk. It is actually about this concept of choosing the time that you take before you reply. And it happens in every situation that is a conversation with people, and you described it super accurately. I call it the pounce, where you just want to pounce into the next thing. Everybody's waiting, and there's a lot of science behind it. There's a recent study done, an international linguistic study, that tried to measure the gap between when I finish talking and then you start talking. And it's all mathematical, and they bell curved it out, and you have two extremes. You have the Chinese, which is a very, very crazy small gap. And then you have the Dutch, which is a little bit larger, but on average, statistically significant. The time that it takes for this interaction, the gap, the space, the pause, is 0.2 seconds.
Wow.
Now, what's crazy is that there is science and studies that show it takes between 0.4 to 0.6 seconds to pull words from your brain and actually get it out of your mouth. So what that means is that, just as you described, people are formulating in their head what they're going to say before the person is finished talking, and there is this overlap.
Yes.
And the practical way to do this is to pause and not pounce.
Yeah, it's really funny that you describe it like that, and that's why I speak. I mean, and I would recommend, if you're going to talk about something, talk about it from experience. And I know that I talk about transparency, in full transparency. I'm going to speak from my experience, and that's what I do a lot. And I will say, one of the things that I struggle with a lot, that I've gotten a lot better at over a year of doing this, is that exactly. And it's really hard for me. I'll digress for 1 second. We were talking about, I love having conversations, hence why they're called conversations. But because they're not scripted, for me, being a novice at this, it was a lot harder to encapsulate what you were saying initially. And then the longer you were talking, I was like, whoa, I better hold on to what he said initially. I better hold on to what he said second and third. And it's not because you're saying so many ideas. It's just that I'm not really used to that. So that's one thing that I've really had to practice. And talking about using my life as literally practicing, like when I'm at work, when I'm out with friend or whoever I'm out there, I know that that's something I have to work on to be a better podcast host. So when I'm talking to other people, I'll practice not bouncing like you were showing on the first thing that they said, because I want to be like, oh, I want to fire back and be like, whoa, I got a good retort for that. But then I'm, like I said, I'm automatically tuning out everything else. So I had a feeling that was going to be a common occurrence. And it goes hand in hand with people just sometimes want to talk more than they want to listen. And I think that if you're somebody who openly listens, if I had a friend that I knew every time I talk to them, they're going to listen, then that's more than likely the friend that I want to talk to, because if I've got something to say, I know they're going to listen to. So like, be the friend with an open ear, because a lot of times people need to talk, or they want to talk, and they don't necessarily even want to hear a reply. Like, for example, and I mean this in the most sincere way, when I'm speaking with my wife, sometimes she doesn't need to hear a reply. She just wants to tell me how her day was, and that's totally fine. I want to know how her day is, but I'm just saying, like, you got to be there sometimes just to hear it out. And that's totally fine. And you don't want to just be like, well, you should have done this or you should have done that to make your day better. Just hear that person out sometimes.
Yeah, it's literally just don't be a pouncer, be a pauser. And you let people continue their thoughts. Let them tell the entire day and then let them go more. And there's actually studies that show, it was a fascinating study. They got random people that don't know each other into a room, and they say, here, we just want you to talk with each other. And then they calculated the amount of time that each person physically talked. Mm-hmm. And then they had an exit survey to ask the individuals how they felt connected, whether they liked the person or not. And there was a very clear correlation between the amount of time that somebody talked and their positive feelings for the other person. So even though you feel like you might not get what you want in, if your goal is to build a relationship or build a better, stronger relationship with your wife or your friends, the best thing you can do for them to see you in a more positive light, especially when you meet people for the first time, is to let them talk.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pause right there. I was like, how long? We're going to play the waiting game. Who's going to talk first? But being able to listen like that, it's been a really hard technique. And I said, not even just the pounce technique, but just being a good listener, I think is imperative for any relation in your life whatsoever. And speaking of talking, one of the things that absolutely intrigued me with you is that, like you brought it up, you said your fourth TED Talk, and I think it's really cool that you were on TED Talks, because I love TED Talks. A lot of people love TED Talks. One of my long-term goals that I'm now divulging for the first time is I'd love to be on TED Talks. So I stumbled upon one of your articles. I think you were the author, or you were either featured on it, but it was like, forgive me on the number, but it was like 8 ways to better improve your odds of being on TED Talks. And that was cool.
Actually a 3-article series. So it was in ink, and I was featured, and it's basically what to do before you even think about applying. That's one article. And then what to do to maximize your application is the second article. And then what to do once your application has been submitted is a whole nother article. And it is there's a bit of a science behind it, and you can take the curtain behind and see the Wizard of Oz. Maybe it's more in red on theme with TED, but a lot of people don't understand that you can apply to do it. And there are a few different ways that you can get it. One is having a strong enough personal brand where people reach out to you and say, "Can you please share your message on my stage?" Sure. The other is if you actually reach out there and say, "Hey, knock, 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 I have something that I want to share. Can I share it on your stage?" And I think I submitted to 13 full submissions over about 2 years or more before I got my first one. And then that was enough to spark, it as a brand builder. And then I've been asked sequentially to do it from there. So it's in your future. I can see it.
Thank you very much. But that's a lot of good points. And one of the most recent points you said was you tried 13 times in 2 years. So like you have to keep on trying. And then the other point is that you just don't have to wait around and sit around and wait for them to come to you. Because I've talked to other people and I like kind of hacked their ear a little bit, and I was like, well, how does this happen? And they're like, well, you just kind of like got to go do your thing, build your personal brand, and they're going to come to you. But knowing that you can, even in this realm, kind of go out and reach to them, be relentless in that, and just get your name out there is really cool to do. And I know obviously one of your huge things is personal branding. So I kind of like want to segue into that. And I think that's really cool because that's something like I'm trying to do. I think, I have a good story. Like, I was in the military for 9 years. I got out of the military despite the odds. And
Mad respect, sir. Thank you for. I'm gonna pounce on. It's okay to pounce on certain situations. So like pounce to thank you. So appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you very much. That's a good way to inversely approach that. Like, pouncing is not always bad. Sometimes you got to pounce. But
yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
this is good.
Sometimes you got to pounce. You got to know when to pounce. You got to know when to not pounce. So I mean, you gotta practice pouncing and practice like staying back in the bushes a little bit. Waiting.
Yeah, practice pouncing.
There's something there.
Practice the art of pouncing. Yeah, there's a whole new article right there, and another TED Talk.
Yeah, you're welcome. No. What I was saying is like this career transition that I talk about a lot because I got personally a lot of negative feedback on me wanting to make the decision to get out of the Navy, not because they, gung-ho, like, and I always make the point that I really enjoyed the Navy. I just wanted to take my life a different path, and it was really difficult and it was hard to do it. And I'm a college dropout. That was against me. I didn't have all these certifications that I needed, but I made it. So I want to show people, and I'm segueing this into personal branding, again, is because I want to show people that, hey, I am this person. This is what I did. This is my story, and it's feasible to do this. Because going back to like speaking from experiences, when you speak from experience, that really resonates with you. So like if you're looking to do something and you're really unsure about it, but you find somebody else like, hey, Ryan, you've been on TED Talks, you've been on it 4 times, you've been featured in these articles, then I'm going to be, a little bit more trusting of your process than somebody who hasn't even been on it yet. So I would say to somebody listening, if you're looking to do something, definitely go find somebody that's done not kind of what you've done, but exactly what you've done. So for me, like, I talk about career transition on the whole, like in a general landscape. But more importantly, I like to focus on the career transition within the military because I've lived that, and that's who I want to target, and that's who should reach out to me because I've done that. And yeah, I can help you, and I could talk about the mindset kind of like we're talking about, which is kind of like that general, landscaping again. But if you want to get out of the military, or I don't care what it is, whatever your variable is, like find somebody that actually does what you want to do. And I know you've kind of touched on that before. I've heard you speak about it before, and I know you're gonna back me up on that, right? Or how can I describe that better maybe?
No, you're completely correct. The biggest I would say the biggest mistake that I see people make when they're building their brands is that they're doing the right things in the wrong order. Okay. And now that's not really a bad thing. It's just understanding that. And so we've developed a process, we as in Leonard Kim, my business partner, and myself, and it's a process that's worked for us, that we've duplicated for our clients. And so back to your point about being able to speak from experience, one of the steps in the process we talk about is drafting. Now, just like you're a race car drafting behind somebody else, or if you're a sailboat and you're drafting in the right spot to maximize the wind and follow along to make decisions based off of them, a good step, which is not the first step, but a good step is to identify 3 individuals that have brands that you would aspire to have or to be. You can look and see what platforms that they're on. You can look and see what the type of audience engagement is. You can actually follow their audience. That's public on Twitter and other platforms. You can see who follows them. You can start to find out what type of their content works the best, and you can sort of mirror that. You can literally draft off of different people to help you jumpstart where to go if you're looking to go in that direction.
Absolutely. I think those are great points. And I'm a huge advocate of Instagram. That's my largest medium that I utilize to get my podcast and my word out there. And you're right. It's as easy as followers following. So this is the person that I strive to be like. I want to do things like him or her. Following followers. I'm going to click on followers. I'm going to see like who they are, what they're doing. And like the research has already been done for me. Like, I don't have to pay thousands of dollars to get the research. I just literally need to click on these two things that I've just described, and I can target it that way. And again, like, one of the reoccurring topics that comes up all the time, and I don't mind having it reoccurring, is social media. Like, so all these things, like, define your target market and find somebody that is doing what you already want to do, but utilize all these tools that are making things so much easier for us already, that are literally at our fingertips all of the time. And I want to get away from, like, the negative stereotypes of social media and, like, beat it to a pulp that it's just a tool and it's how you use it. So, like, if you have these tools at your disposal and you know what you want to do, then, like, use the tool in a good way that's going to benefit you the most.
Yeah. So when it comes to personal branding, the nice thing is that everyone already has a brand. Everyone already has a personal brand. And it's sort of intimidating, but also can be empowering, because as soon as you realize that, you can start to take action to be an active role in what your narrative looks like. Now, one of the things that I love to talk about is the first few steps of the branding process, because that really sets the compass course for the direction that you're going to be on. And as an overarching, one of the ways that I look at branding is that the best way to differentiate yourself is to actually be yourself.
Yes.
And Leonard and I have a book that's coming out called Ditch the Act, Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You for Greater Success. And the idea, the concept is, if you're drafting, but you're actually mimicking and you're copycatting, then everybody in that area is going to look the exact same. And there's not going to be a differentiation. But what makes you different is your experience. If you look at a typical bio from somebody, they're going to list their accolades, they're going to look like badasses, and they're going to talk about everything that went right. That's a common mistake, because people relate to people through the human qualities, the things where things didn't go right, where you were actually human, when things fell apart, when you were emotionally vulnerable and people want to be there for you. So as an overarching, so sort of demystify I have to have this perfect looking image, which I think plays into the negative stereotype of social media. Everybody is following those Joneses, but if you do want to stand out right now in this day and age, it's about being yourself, because in order for people to do business with you or to make a successful transition to your audience members, it's about getting people to know you, like you, and trust you.
Yes.
And people want to, as a human, right? They to know you as a person. And so that's really what true personal brand is, just owning your own story, sharing your old stories, and showing how your experiences actually translate into expertise. And when you look at it that way, it's not as intimidating as it might think. There is a component that has to do with it takes a long time, because it is basically you're sharing what has happened up into a point to where you're sharing what is happening. And so for people that are looking for a quick fix, or they're looking for, I just need to start my brand now, it's like, you already have a brand. It's about taking and steering that ship. One of the more fundamental things I'd love to hit home with your audience is that when it comes to deciding what you want to be known for, what this brand is, if somebody's going to say, wow, that is his brand, it is not just what you want to be known for, and it is not just what other people think about you already as. It is the intersection between the two. It is the connecting between what I want to be known as and what other people already think of me as. And once you establish that, then you start to see this connection, because it's easier to convince people something that they already know than it is to convince them something that you're not. So if you come out and you're like, all right, I'm going to start a brand. Here we go. This is my brand. This is what I look like, right? As opposed to being like, I've been here the whole time. I'm just going to open up a little bit more. And in the book, we talk about these 5 levels of exposure. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 1 is something like, I literally went to the gym today and was missing a shoe. That's not something that I would normally share with people. But if I were to tweet that, I would get all kinds of people that are like, oh my gosh, I forgot my belt. And this one time, like, you're giving people a chance to get involved.
Sure.
I get, for level 1 and level 2 exposures, I get 10 to 20 to 50 times more engagement on those posts. they don't make me look amazing. They actually make me look kind of silly. They make me kind of look dumb. Like the other day I washed my car, didn't look at the forecast, and it rained today. So I'm like, when you wash your car and it rains, and people like enjoy participating in the conversation around that. So there's level 1, level 2 is relationship things that maybe go wrong that people can relate to. Level 3 has to do with bigger fears of sharing. Level 4 is business failures or major life things that go wrong. And level 5 you stay away from, which is politics and some of these, these dividing topics. But to build a brand is just to own your own story. And it's to sort of find this through line between what you want to be known for and what others think about you. So it's not as far away as you think. It's just a conscious effort of creating the habits to decide what you want to be known for and help to communicate that through the content using social media, for an example, as a tool.
Yeah. And I love what it's come back to. It's been like, I've always heard growing up, always be yourself. And now more than ever, that's what's coming to light. It's, hey, we need to be ourselves. And if you want to build your personal brand that is you, who you've always been, just continue being yourself and don't try to be somebody that you think they should be. And it's funny, I think I've made this juxtaposition once before, and I believe I said I did it with relationships as well. And I said, when I used to be trying to get into the relation and dating field before, I was like, I was wondering what this girl would like or what she wouldn't like in me. I'm going to try to be that person, and I'm going to try to be that person as best as I can. And this isn't working. Why isn't this working? I thought this is what they would like. And then after I got a little bit more confident in who I was and who I really wanted to be, and I just was me all the time, regardless if there were guys or girls in front of me, then that's when I started gaining some traction. And
yeah, exactly. And the traction is attraction. We are attracted to people who are genuine, and we can sniff out the people that are phony. But the problem is you see a lot of what the phoniness is. It might be through a sponsored ad. They're in front of these expensive things, which probably aren't theirs. And there's a certain crowd that wants things to happen faster than not. And then that's what sort of feeds this economy of people who feel like putting a mask on is going to help them get to where they want to go. But we really found that the engagement and the connection and getting people to know you through what has gone wrong is a completely it's a paradigm shift as to what you might think. But it's when you start being vulnerable and when you start actually being like, okay, this is who I am, you realize that you are not for everyone. Now, I think that the A word and the E word are overused, right? If I ask you, who's your podcast for? And if you said the E word or the A word, I'd slap you on the hand. I'd say, no, your podcast is not for everyone, and that's totally okay. Mm-hmm. So stop trying to play to the masses. The riches are in the niches, and it's finding and being comfortable to say, no, this maybe isn't for you. And as soon as you tell somebody it's probably not for them, in fact, I challenge you, when you have people talk to you about the podcast, sure, right? Be like, I love it, man. I just did 50 episodes, but it's probably not something that you're interested in. So tell me, what are you up to? They're going to go, whoa, wait. What's the podcast? I'm going to check it out. Like, it's that simple, as opposed to this podcast is amazing for everyone. So just knowing your market, knowing your solution, and knowing the problem that you solve. And one thing I'll kind of talk about real quickly here is my 313 method. This is like, this is my screaming 9-day-old baby, but it's like 5, 6, 7 years old. And
still screaming.
Still screaming. But I'm okay with it. The 313 is an exercise that helps people really narrow down their core positioning and what to say when they're asked what to do. And I make an argument. This may sound harsh, and it's somewhat intended to shock people, but no one cares what you do. Nobody cares about your podcast. Nobody cares about your business. Nobody cares about your book. Instead, they care more so about the problem that you solve, the problem that's going to be solved by your podcast, and the problem that the book is going to solve for you. Yeah. So as soon as you start to flip that, imagine, and this is a challenge that you can take. People will continuously ask you, what do you do? And I'm assuming you get asked what you do all the time. That's probably the most frequent question that we ask each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when somebody asks you what you do, you think, okay, this is my chance to sort of let my brand shine, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I do. But what if for a moment, instead of telling people what you do, tell them that what you do doesn't even matter. In fact, what really matters is the problem that you solve. And then you stop talking. And they're going to go, so what problem do you solve? Then you tell them the problem that you solve. You ask them if it's a legitimate problem. They say yes. If you ask them if it's a problem that they have, if they say yes, okay.
Yeah.
And then you can say, is this a problem that you're looking to fix sometime soon? If they say yes, you can tell them, perfect, I can help you out. Now, if you notice, I have not told you what I do. I've just positioned my value in terms of the problem that I solve.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that is one of the most fundamental changes that you can make to get people interested in what you do.
Well, doesn't that go back to kind of like what you were saying initially when we started this conversation, and that was listening to people? So you're not just jumping the gun and saying, hey, this is what I do, or this is what my podcast is about, or whatever that, but you're just saying, you're asking these questions and you're just waiting to hear back. And then you're leveraging that to say what you do. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. It really is. And equally important, I cannot wait to try out the, you wouldn't be interested. Because I will say, I do like this shameless marketing thing where I'm always trying, like I got a haircut the other day and I like got my hairdresser to subscribe. And I'm always like telling people, because I got to tell everybody.
It'd be a good challenge to flip that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you still can, if you identify that it would make sense for them. But if you flip it, there's a lot of value. And if you are interested in that as a concept, my third TEDx talk is titled Why No One Cares What You Do.
Well, we'll have to, actually, what I should do and what I will do now that I'm thinking about it is I will put all that stuff in the summary. So I would highly encourage everybody to look at that, because I think these are absolutely brilliant and very intriguing. I love when I get ideas. Well, I would say everybody, I will use the E word, and I think I can confidently use the E word here. But and please correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody loves when they get a new idea implanted in their head for the first time. And I think if you can articulate yourself in a manner to implant an idea in somebody's head that they haven't had before, then they will be more apt to listening, potentially. How do you see that?
I have a small spin to it.
Let's do it.
The spin is that the most powerful thing you can do is to get other people to come up with your idea before you tell them what it is. And here's how you do it. If for example, if you were to say the problem that your podcast solves, put me on the hot seat. Like, what is the biggest single problem that your podcast solves?
Career transition. And more specifically, like I mentioned, with people getting out of the Navy and thinking that they do not have what it takes to get out and pursue a career in the civilian sector. Okay.
So let's say that we squished that down into something that was tight and sort of resonated emotionally. And the problem is that when those in the military make this transition, it is bloody and terrible and all these different things, right? So imagine that somebody says, what do you do? And you say, it's not what I do, it's a problem that I solve. And they go, okay, interesting. And you tell them, this is the problem. Then they ask you, what do you do? And you say, well, it's a podcast. Let's just say just that.
Sure.
What you've done is you set them up to come up with the idea in their own head. You've given them the problem, and our brains are curious creatures. They want to figure it out.
Yeah.
So if you set up the problem and you start to unveil what it is, you don't even tell them about the podcast, but they're going to be like, oh my gosh, it may be this, and they'll think about your guest. So instead of saying that everyone likes to have a new idea in their head, I think that there's a lot of power in feeding people enough information to where at a certain point they get it.
Yeah.
Because when people are talking with you and you give them just enough information to be interested, but not everything. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it's about. Maybe I'll tell you about my guests, and then maybe I'll tell you about my favorite episode. And then at a certain point, they're going to be like, oh, I got it. I got it. And you're like, you're so smart. You totally get it. So you've planted your idea in their head, but you've given them the opportunity to claim that, to be like, yeah. And you're like, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I love that spin. I do. And it's good, not only because it's different, but it's good because now I get to work on it, because I think that's difficult. I think that would be something that I can strive to work on, to articulate to other people, to implant that. And it just goes with everything. It's been a really common theme common theme of just not pouncing immediately, not just telling somebody what you're thinking, not just telling somebody what you're doing. All of these things are just things that are just happening immediately. They're reactions. It's a very linear, but approaching it from a different angle, I think is I like to be challenged mentally. So that's why I was like saying, well, I'm going to challenge your E word. And then you threw it back at me and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. This is a different perspective. And now I've seen it. I've turned it this way and I've looked at it from a different perspective. And now I get to practice this because I think that's going to be difficult to do, but that's the kind of challenge I'm looking for. So I appreciate you spinning that for me.
Yeah. And for your audience specifically, for people who have been in the military, if you think about it, you are trained to solve problems. That's what you do, right? It's not as much your position or your rank or your file or whatever. It's how you participate and evaluate and make sure that you are solving the problem, not halfway, but like full way, and doing it right, making sure it's safe. And so maybe something to play with as you work with your clients is saying, let's not focus on as much of like what you can do, but let's reposition that into your ability to solve problems, because people don't hire you for what you do. They hire you for the problems that you can solve. And so If you just flip it to a problem-based like outlook, then all of a sudden you can give away less information that's more valuable, that creates interest, that sort of creates this tension. And then when they find out what you actually do or what your skills are, then there's this release. And that release probably triggers dopamine, gets them involved in the idea. And it's like, wow, this is great. As opposed to, this is what I do. Because I don't care what you do. I care about the problem that you solve.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful note to end on, is what problem are you solving? And that's something I'm always working on, because that's what I want to do in the podcast. Is I'm solving problems for myself by learning how to better articulate myself, learning all these new ideas that people are implementing. I'm not trying to regurgitate it now to see if I really learned it, but I'm trying to learn these ideas that you didn't directly tell me, but throughout all these conversations that we've just had, that now I'm able to come up with these things myself. And I think there's a wealth of knowledge here, and I've thoroughly appreciated my time with you. It's been a very interesting conversation in the sense of, again, like, I love things that I've had these kind of thoughts before, but now I'm looking at them from different perspectives. And I think that's a very good thing that people should try to do, is just look at things from different perspectives and always be listening. And I think that's one of the big things I take away from this, is just always listen, don't pounce, and just hear what somebody has to say thoroughly and truly.
Well said, sir. Well said.
It's been an absolute pleasure. But Ryan, what is the best way for people to contact you if they want to learn more about you, book you, hear more about your TED Talks? Well, I'll link those, but what else can we get for them?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Once you get to a certain point, I can just say Google me, which is kind of nice,
Sweet.
right? You can pick your poison. Yeah, my favorite platform to be on, if you want to engage and get me, is Twitter.
Okay.
Tweet me at Ryan Foland, and I run my own Twitter, and so that's a fun, engaging platform for me. And I'd encourage you also to follow our book, at Ditch the Act. And we've actually created a Twitter account for our book, and it is a real book. And so the book is speaking for itself. And if you've ever wanted to meet and have a conversation and get along with a book, follow at Ditch the Act.
That's brilliant.
But really, RyanFoland.com is where everything sort of sits. You can check out my TEDx talks. It's how to not get chased by a bear. That's number one. Borderline millennial disorder, for those struggling with adopting new technologies. Why no one cares what you do. And then the one thing to make you connect faster more often, which is not to pounce. But, there's a few more things than just one. So you can just forget that and just Google me and figure it out. But look for Ditch the Act coming out in October of 2019. This is we're so excited because if I could leave one message, it is, in order to build the best brand that is your best self, is to be your truest self, ditch the act and start to be real. And the realer you are, I don't even know if realer is a real word.
We can say whatever we want here, Ryan.
The more real you are, the more people connect with you. And at the end of the day, you don't have to be like anybody else, because you are you. So
I love
ditch the act, take it step at a time, step by step. And remember that successful people are not successful because they're doing things that everybody else cannot do. Successful people are doing what everyone else can do, but nobody does. That could be waking up early. That could be watching something for your own personal development. That could be waiting just a little bit longer to talk. So everybody's looking for these cheats and hacks. And what's the trick? The trick is to just have better habits and be a real person and stay healthy and drink water and get sleep and be nice to people. Like, those are the foundational things. And it's inspiring to sort of like smack people across the face with it, because not everything is a growth hack. Like, enjoy the journey and be yourself. That's my final answer.
It's wonderful. And that's the final answer to the 52nd episode of the Kristof Lewis podcast. I mean, man, that is super cool. I don't know. These are these things sometimes you don't know where they're going to end up. And you start a thing, you start a podcast, and you're like, I don't know where this is going. But I was like, I'm going to do one a week for a year, and I'm going to do my absolute best I can to make that happen. And I've made it happen, and you have helped me make that happen. And 51 other wonderful people have made that happen. So thank you so very much for being a part of this and bringing my year to a wraps. It's a wonderful feeling, and I hope everything that we've talked about here inspires other people, and I hope that me going through with this and actually following through with it for a year inspires people as well. So Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, and end it with a year with a Skype high five. You ready?
All right. Boom. Yes. We got a little bit of lag. I'm not even going to try that on Skype anymore. That was terrible.
It doesn't matter whether or not it works. It matters that you try. There we go.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. We'll see you later.
All right. Adios.